because I want to get you up to speed on what we're doing. So, and then I'll share with you some background, and then we'll jump in. So the think tank is in the Orchestrate Sales site, and underneath that group, we have our Zoom link, and that's how everybody's joining. You can see all these meetings set up. Past meetings are recorded. So if I click on the past meeting, there's the recordings here, and you can listen to them and download them and stuff. So that's under the Zoom tab. And then also under the documents, we're posting our orchestration journey and roadmap, and we're going through the milestones. So this is on the events page. So if I go to the events page, you know, we list them all here. They're weekly at the same time. So if basically you want to just set up a recurring event.
See that? Okay.
And then what we've been doing is walking through with an orchestrator, right? Somebody in sales enablement that has a role, is trying to elevate their role and also fight the fires internally to bridge strategy and tactics. So we've been using a real life case study as we go through the roadmap. And so what I'll do is introduce Phil. So Phil Medina is our orchestrator that comes, and he shares a little bit about his background. And then, so Doug's rejoining the group. He's been out for a while. So Phil, can you just share your background and your role? And then let's go around the horn real quick, and we can all do quick introductions, and then we'll kick off.
Sure. I'm the guinea pig right now. My name is Phil, and sometimes I don't know what day it is. So that's proof that I'm an orchestrator.
Yep. And you're in a SaaS company.
I'm in a SaaS company. We are in tax compliance, which is not sexy or cool, but it is very, very complicated. Very, very complicated. We grow by acquisition, which makes it more complicated in a complicated arena. We are a very young public company, which makes it more complicated in a complicated arena. And we are global, which makes it more complicated I think we're like to the 5th power, I think right now. Let's see, I'm 10 months into this company. This is my 3rd role with the company, all different flavors of enablement. So there's a big need, and there was ambition to grow and grow and grow and grow. And there, from my perspective, there was a critical gap in the infrastructure to teach and make sure we had people growing in the right directions, right? So now I get to inherit that and triage it. So I own sales enablement for North America right now, which is, roughly 120, 130 sales executives and another 100 and so sales development reps between the US and 40 or so that are outsourced in India as well in our Pune office. So we've got a mix of sales development and sales executives in the equation. I've got a very weird org chart because I'm inheriting leads, because that's how we've taught before, was through leads, right? A lot of osmosis and whatnot. So it's been an interesting couple of months in this 3rd role here at this point, trying to structure this up. And it looks like in Q3, I will be inheriting the rest of the world as well. So I'll have to, expand that sphere to our Brighton, Pune, and I keep forgetting the name of the Brazil office.
Oh, Sao Paulo.
Yes, there you go. Thank you, Brian. Brian knows. So
yeah, so that's awesome, and we're walking through the journey with you, which is great, and we're giving you things to think about, which is it's a very helpful synthesis.
Yeah,
and it's quite a journey you're on, and glad you could spend the time, because I know you're slammed as you got to carve this out and protect the calendar, so we appreciate you doing that.
Yeah, no, it's been really, really good the last couple of weeks, I think, from my perspective. It's nice to kind of self-calibrate and say, these are all the plates that I have spinning at the same time. How many of them make sense and which ones need to, stop, start, and continue kind of to a degree, right?
Right. Awesome. Well, let's go around the horn. Can you guys introduce yourself to Doug real quick? And then Doug, you can introduce yourself and give a little update on whatever you want to share, and then we'll jump into the playbook.
I don't know. I could start if we have a certain.
Thanks, Mark. No, go for it.
Doug, good to meet you. My name is Mark Ondash. I'm in Tarpon Springs, Florida, and we just went from April to July down here. May and June did not happen. It's like that hot. I come from a sales training in the financial services and investment management background, and discovered. Well, I've known Brian for about 2 years now, but have was enlightened about 2 months ago when I spent my initial time on Orchestrate Sales, and I have been attending the think tanks and certainly trying to promote what we're doing. And I try to stay out of the penalty box, so you'll find out about that later. Too many.
All right. Great.
Okay.
Hey, or Helena, you can go. Yeah. Oh, thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So my name is Helena Stoy, and I am based out of Sweden. I have background in the IT software and services industry primarily. And in short, my experience in sales enablement is building up from scratch sales enablement function and bringing it to maturity 3 level in very large organizations, global organizations.
Great.
Helen, I
Thanks.
think I recall you being on some of our earlier orchestrator calls.
Yes, that's correct.
So nice.
And Helen and I met, what, 13 years ago?
Yeah,
When I was at
something
Forrester.
like that. In the very early days.
That's right. That's right. Kate, do you want to go
Okay.
next?
Yeah, I'll go. Hi, Doug. So Kate O'Sullivan, I'm based in Barcelona, Spain, and I'm a sales enablement manager at SUSE. And I believe, yeah. So
Yes.
you're Micro Focus, right? So we haven't crossed
Yes.
before, but I used to be based in.
I was happily involved in the acquisition of SUSE back in 2002 by Novell, and unfortunately participated in the separation of SUSE from Micro Focus a few years ago. So yeah, so congratulations, glad you're on.
Yeah, thank you. And I guess I came to the table through the podcast and through reading different pieces. And I was a member of the Sales Enablement Society in the UK when it's set up there. So just kind of have been following and, absorbing all the stuff as we go along. So at SUSE, as you probably know, fighting productitis, and I'm aligned on the portfolio side. So trying to, it's a very product focused company, right? Like Micro Focus used to be as well. So
Still is.
every day is a journey.
Absolutely.
Nice to meet you.
Great. Eric, do you want to go next?
Happy to. I know most of you. Eric Hosteen. I'm based in Denver. And my orchestration comes around fixing a condition that I call round canoe syndrome. And round canoe syndrome happens when we have a sales leader, a marketing leader, and a product leader in a round boat, and the CEO says, start rowing faster.
That's right.
Get
All
busy,
right.
right?
That's right.
That's right. Just go. Speed and velocity are 2 different things.
Vilbrecht, do you want to go next? Just doing quick introductions for Doug. Oh, looks like you're muted.
Exactly. You have to find where this button is.
There it is.
Currently. Good. I'm a colleague of Kate, so I follow the same cadence there. So happily working at SUSE, having background in enablement coming from Accenture and Logic at CMG. So very eager to be part of this group.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for joining. Parker, do you want to go next?
Sure. So my name's Parker Martin. I'm working out of Wilmington. And I am the community manager for Orchestrate Sales. So I started working about 3 weeks ago. So I'm happy to be here with you guys.
Cool.
Good.
And then Bruce is on. Hey, Michael Lee, Bruce Lee.
Bruce Lee.
Bruce Lee had a step out for a minute. He'll be back though.
Okay, so he's helping as well on the community piece. All right, Doug, you can go next and just share anything you like, and then I'll walk through what we're doing on the think tank.
Sure. So obviously, name's Doug Clower. I spent 20 years through various instantiations of Novell to Attachmate, then to Micro Focus, and been involved in a lot of different things. I actually first met with Scott Santucci. Didn't get the opportunity to meet with Brian at the time, but Scott in 2009, when we were starting to do some initial stuff with Scott Lewis, who was heading up our sales enablement kind of efforts, if you will, at the time. So we were doing a lot of different things there. But so I've had a long history of working with Scott in the sales enablement space, and am one of the quote unquote, by grace from Scott, a founding member of the Sales Enablement Society. So I have been around for quite a while. Historically, I actually have my degree in architecture. And when I say architecture, I'm talking about, physical architecture, buildings, commercial, industrial, institutional, you name it. But transitioned over into technology, and just my career arc has taken me through everything from the commodity side and white box selling all the way through value selling and really solving customer problems today. So that's the most important part.
Awesome. Thanks, Doug. All right, so I'll do our little preamble just as a way of getting everybody centered and setting some context, and then Phil can help by jumping in on where we're at on the playbook from his perspective. But these are our principles: growth mindset, sharing, economy, gaining from conflict. So sometimes I have to put Mark in the penalty box, for example. Be inclusive. Sometimes Mark tells me he's going to give me his point of view. Having courage, being patient, and leading with you. So these are our principles. We invoke them to help us move forward and be principle driven as we're orchestrators. We are also focusing on the idea of a playbook in this think tank because we're trying to elevate the profession. So we believe that sales enablement is a function. That function exists to improve the ecosystem that salespeople operate within. We believe that the function should provide ongoing services and run as a business within a business. This sets us really apart from every other sales enablement organization and effort out there because they're quite the opposite, focused on fixing salespeople and unleashing things upon them to make them do things. When we partner with sales management, what that means is offering those services and solutions to help them be successful and be an advocate for sales management, who's often left off the table, out of the table, off the discussion. So those are the we believe statements. So we also are shifting from going to market to go into customer. What that means is enablement as a whole is involved in creating opportunities and turning those opportunities into possibilities and helping sales teams do that and co-creating demand. Most of the companies that exist out there today, though, are hardwired around product and responding to demand. And this is the opportunity for sales enablement, is to move from helping create an ecosystem around product, us, to creating and orchestrating the ecosystem around what customers really need to make buying decisions. This sounds easy in concept. However, when the whole world is wired one way and then we come along, it can be a lot of discussions and a lot of challenges that we need to overcome. The way we do that is we blend strategy and tactics together. We are savvy as the orchestrators in the culture of the company, the strategy, the organization, the people, and the tactics. We do that across portfolio sales forces, plural, where no one sales force or one sales team fits all. Each has its own unique pattern. So orchestrating that and developing the techniques to do that is critical, especially when we're trying to drive outcomes, because outcomes are what executives want, buying executives. They want to achieve end state. They want to pursue high-level initiatives to drive change and results, measure those results, and that means it's happening over time and over a life cycle. So it's where customers and buyers start their work is when the purchase is made. In many organizations, that's when sales is over. And so that time horizon difference is huge. We equip people here at Orchestrate Sales to fight productitis, and productitis is the hidden cancer, the hidden or underlying root cause problem that is lurking in most organizations that is not seen and does not have an identity. And so we actually educate people on productitis and make it a thing as we orchestrate. And these are what orchestrators do. It's interesting how many people are now calling themselves orchestrators. We've had this happen in sales enablement too. I'm a sales enablement person. This is why we lead with this preamble, because we don't want orchestrators to get hijacked, and unfortunately that's already happening because of the marketing and LinkedIn work. So I need your help, guys, to think about how do we get the real definition of orchestrating out there. We link strategy to tactics, and then what I'll do is I'll share this, and then we'll go to the playbook, because our goal is to move from individual activities and help Phil evolve his business within a business to create a coordinated impact and then drive integrated performance. This is a journey over time to do the right things and do those things right. That means he's got to think through all of this stuff in order to drive the right kind of change. And also it's in the sales organization that's constantly evolving, and new products are coming to market and new solutions are being driven. On that journey, he's moving from a fragmented enablement function to more of a managed function to an adaptive function. This is the journey over time. This is a maturity view, if you will. He has some aspects of managed, some aspects of fragmented. How does he evolve over time? That's part of this roadmap discussion, because as he evolves, he's going to have to think through the processes, the programs, and the services. And then my new slide, I don't know if I've shown this before, is what that looks like. So people, process, information, technology, from response enablement to commercial enablement. You can see I have a level 0, which is what most people are in right now. Level 1 is efficient processes. Level 2 is insight-driven programs. And 3 is a strategic partnership, a strategic value. So this is where we're at. And what we're trying to do is this little dotted line right here. This is our roadmap discussion. We're trying to move over to here through a structured approach, which is happening on this think tank. And Phil is walking this dotted line, which looks nice and linear, but is not. But we have a 2-dimensional space in PowerPoint. So we wish we could just project manage this, but sometimes we're in level 3 things, and then we come back to emergent foundation things, and it's a bit of a wheel. So that's the preamble. So Doug, that's what we've been working on while you've been away, and also this is the approach that we're taking, is to walk through this journey together.
Some nice evolution going on here.
Yeah, everybody's been contributing to this. So
well done, team.
How does it sound as a talk track?
As a talk track, it sounds excellent. That's again, hats off. Well done, team. You've actually made a great deal of progress in helping catalyze this, I guess is the best way to describe it. So
cool. Yeah, does anybody want to add anything or any comments on the preamble before we jump into the playbook? Everybody's in the right class.
No, all good, Brian. All good.
Awesome.
Brian, quick question. Okay, it's for the group, maybe, or an observation again. So, if we go back a slide, is there something that displays the symptoms of being purely tactical or of embracing productitis?
Mhm. Yeah, what do you guys think about the idea of what are the symptoms of productitis? What does it look like? Or what does it feel
I
like?
think it looks like a PowerPoint slide that has 97 lines on it with different colors between, beta and limited availability and general availability and overlapping dates of product / feature launches. And I mean, I think that's usually the slide that makes me throw up right away. Is that one, when we've got 9 different products launching with at the same time or in the same month with no cohesion or packaging considerations in how we're taking those to market. To me, that's a productitis sign for myself, I would say.
Mhm.
But a
Well, and-
website that has above the fold, the call to action, book a demo.
Yeah, there you go. That's a good
That's
one.
a good one.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
and this goes back to what I have talked about for years now, and that is when the focus is on what product am I selling to the customer, I'm selling instead of solving. So I'm selling product instead of solving problems. That's the quickest way I begin to describe productitis.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
There's a whole, sorry.
no, go ahead.
I was going to say there's a whole bunch of things, right? You've got sales reps who, because they're selling to products, they're talking to users, not buyers. The inability of initiatives when people say, so, talk to the C-suite, but they have nothing to talk to them about, right? Because if you go in with your product decks and demos, you're going to be laughed out of the room. So it's that getting relegated to who you sound like, inaccurate forecasting, the inability to do bigger deals because they're only equipped to speak to the lower users. Because if you sell products, that's who you're talking to, users, not buyers.
Good point.
And also when in all of these various presentations and folders and so on, it's the focus is so much on, well, the benefits that companies, the selling company states that the customers will achieve. Well, how do they know that when they are actually creating that presentation? It's less focused on the capabilities that you can help the customers install in their organization to achieve various types of benefits. The capabilities is part of the structure of a company. So for a sustained relationship, I see a greater focus on capabilities rather than just benefits. And to me, that is a sign that it's more productitis.
It almost sounds like it should
Benefits
completely flipped over, where the entire presentation is nothing more than being focused completely on the customer and customer insights and customer issues and customer problems. Completely instead of the product.
Yeah.
Be interesting to see what that would look like. Here's a before and after. Oh, I'm slide into the doer.
Well, here I'll show you some things. So yes, the orchestrated or the architected view of a company that is not product centered is an interesting thing to think about, because customers don't care how you're organized, they just want the value. So that's the challenge, right? So in productitis land, there's a lot of complexity, the customer's world, your company is evolving and changing. salespeople are stuck in the middle, right? And it's a lack of coordination. And executives say, hey, we need to go sell more stuff. And everybody from product, marketing, sales, finance, I'll get my team right on that. We're all going to go do that. Let's go. And there's no coordination. And that complexity creates a productitis hairball that, to Kate's point, salespeople either show up and throw up and give all that complexity and productitis to customers for them to figure out, which is the top row, or there's a heroic effort by really top performing salespeople to wrangle productitis in and simplify for customers. Or you could do what we're talking about, which is orchestrate the ecosystem to drive productitis out without a reorg. It is very much an influencing type of challenge. And what we're
Right.
Yeah.
One thing I would always like to say to add to this kind of conversation is that you should be very conscious about what your, say, business model as a company is, because I would be more agitated by a company who wants to sell solutions or claim to be able to do more for a customer than only selling a product. So if you are a very product-oriented organization, you only sell a product, you sell gasoline, then you shouldn't try to make a whole story on how you're fueling the engine of the customer, because at the end of the day, the invoice comes for so much gallon of gasoline, left or right. So I fully agree with the stance that you should elevate the discussion with customers, but only after you're very conscious about what your actual business is. And again, companies who try to talk about solutions and only have products in store, so they can't really solve a solution for a customer, they can only provide pieces of a solution, shouldn't claim that they want to talk about, say, a solution either. So again, I think great conversation, let that be very fair said, but it depends a little bit as well on the model you have as a company, I would think.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think Will you bring up a good point. I mean, I'm not disparaging SUSE on this, but SUSE is a little bit more product oriented, obviously with the subscription element and the approach that it's all support driven kind of thing. It does tend to be more product driven, and there are some solutions they add on top of some basic products. But what you have to be careful of as a company, and this is what's going to happen, is that when you're in a product environment, you're going to end up in a commodity space, and that's going to substantially impact your commercial ratio. At least that's the way I've seen it play out over the 20 years that I've been in the software industry itself. So it's a good point that you have to understand what your model is, and then you have to structure what you do based on the model of the company you're in. So, if I'm selling salt, I'm selling salt, and salt is salt is salt, unless you can somehow distinguish yourself from, common salt by saying pink Himalayan salt, or, curing salt, or whatever it happens to be.
It's a seasoning platform, Doug.
Yep.
Creating an experience. But that's a good point. Like Scott had, and a lot of what I show is stuff from the webinars, and there's a bit of a discussion around where does productitis come from that we're having, and it's really valuable because Vilbeck's right. If your company is selling to customers that want transactional solutions, what does that look like? And this was from the Forrester research we did a long time ago, but this idea that salespeople clearly understand, they understand business issues and who they're selling to. And Scott builds these relationship rhythms. So if you plot this out, what you're selling, the number of products and solutions and capabilities as the parts, and then who you got to navigate to. So to Vilberg's point, if you got one person as a buying decision maker and you're selling salt or water, you're going to be in this bottom left. If you're trying to migrate a data center from, the UK to India, you're going to be in the top right, So that's the example. So if you go on the buyer side, they just want tasks done. They just want their water. You don't need a solution sales team for that lower left quadrant. A buyer that wants bundled salt plus pepper plus, oregano, they're going to want more service, and they want to bundle those parts into something that's cheaper. And then from the bottom right, if they want problem solving that's cross-functional, they're going to need help with that. That domain expertise is required, solution selling, and then eventually you get to we're co-creating value together and we're driving outcomes together. These create relationship rhythms where the pattern of sales forces that sales enablers or orchestrators support becomes critical, because in all 4 quadrants, in a company like where Helena was, she probably supported sales teams in all 4 quadrants to some degree, or, if you're an army of one, how are you supporting the sales team? And this becomes a business case for more support to orchestrate these quadrants of relationship, where you have to align the message plus the skills of salespeople to what buyers really want and need.
And to add to that, Brian, if I may, to stress the point of Kate as well, if you would be in the left low quadrant and you would sell, say, a commodity as water, it doesn't mean you have to know what the experience of the customer should be. Because if I just want to have a glass of water, I want to have it cold, I only want to have 30 centiliters. So that would be my optimal experience. If I have to fill a swimming pool, I want to have it 26 degrees, 22 degrees, and I want a lot of them. So you still can talk about what is the value for the customer? How should I present the commodity I have so that it adheres to the need of a customer, despite the fact it's a commodity product, so to say. There is still a lot of work to do, even if it's around products or commodities, to make sure that you fulfill the needs of customers, just to be.
Yeah, as without over engineering it, making it really expensive, because that happens where they build a solution sales force on top of it and their margins go way down. You over engineer the bottom left, you're not gonna have a solid return.
True, but you don't have to over engineer. It's just what tone of voice are you using? What language are you using? How do you guide the sellers you're having with talking the right language to customers, instead of saying how much liters do you want? So it's not that they need to have more, it's just that they need to have the right language. And it counts for all the different quadrants, of course, as well. So that's what they have in common, is what it is.
Yeah, and that's the commercial complexity, right? So the bottom left, you might have 2 decision makers, and the top right, you've got different budget owners and wallet owners, and different messages are required by salespeople, different skills, different techniques. Yeah. So this is the challenge with orchestration is how do you develop those types of patterns? And what we talked about and what Scott talked about in the research was in our COVID research, we found that sales enablement has evolved to try to tackle these things, but there's not a lot of structure. And tackling productitis in a structured way across that portfolio of sales teams is an opportunity. And as Doug shared, that's an opportunity to drive the commercial ratio. So at commercialratio.com, there's a metric that's actually been used by TCV, who are the venture capital company that behind Uber, Airbnb, et cetera. And Scott's been working with them to deploy this commercial ratio metric across 50 companies in their portfolio, 40 companies in their portfolio. So this is a aggregate view of sales and marketing spend. So what the company spends on sales and marketing and their return or their growth from last year. So you take the growth year over year, and you say, okay, we grew by $1 million. Okay, well, how much did you spend on sales and marketing to get that $1 million? And most companies are in the 0.2 unsustainable range, and they're not in the balanced zone. In theory, every dollar you spend on sales and marketing should get $1 back in growth. That's what executives would expect. However, that doesn't happen because of the commercial complexity and productitis that exists. So this metric is a good one to hang your hat on, but you got to have the talk track behind it. You can't just wheel in the metric and talk about how the baby's ugly without having a plan and laying out some foundation that we're talking about here. But since Doug brought up the commercial ratio, that's why I wanted to connect the dots there. And productitis is the hidden hidden challenge that drives the commercial ratio into the red, and it's hidden, literally hidden. Executives can't see it. They don't know why it's there. They don't know where it comes from. And they don't understand how all these investments don't pan out. And it's because there's not a orchestration. So that's why we're here.
Brian,
Yeah.
one thing I have been wondering a lot about when I have looked through various materials that you have shared, and that is well, I don't really see sales operations anywhere, or very, very little of it. And I'm wondering about that. And the reason why I'm wondering about it is when you're looking at parts of the commercial engine that has to do with efficiencies, for instance, that has to do with the analytics of the whole commercial system. And when you are looking at the necessary data that you have to have in various, to look at in various parts of this commercial system. So in these various enablement streams, where do you see sales operations? Because I think it's such a, it's like the back office almost of a lot of what is being done. If you see the sales guys, the marketing guys, and especially, well, everyone who's customer facing, they are really the front of the front office. But you have this very, very important part of the whole machinery of this engine to basically make it run and run in an efficient manner. Sales operations, I find, is a crucial part of that. And I can't square with anything here. Where does that come in?
Yeah, it's a good question. You know, if you look at productivity, which is what where you're talking about there, and you look at productivity, what is productivity? It's efficiency and effectiveness. So effectiveness is around how well our salespeople are able to do something, their skills, their methods, their techniques. That's how effective is the sales forces, the salespeople in these sales forces. And then there's the efficiency side, which is how, quickly, how well they can, how fast, how efficient can they do it, which is a lot of process and a lot of procedure and simplification. The orchestrator or the sales enablement landscapes, when you look at it, the closest would be the organizational enablement, because when you look at productivity, there's an efficiency and effectiveness piece of all of these. So how efficiently and effectively are we developing talent, message, pipeline? Organizational enablement is the simplification of process and the alignment to sales conversations behind sales. And it's the process organizational layer to help salespeople be more efficient at what they do. So I think what Scott would say is the evolution of enablement is to become, and we talked about this in our first Sales Enablement Society meeting that we ever had in Palm Beach, was this idea that sales enablement evolves to kind of a chief productivity officer, where it's about efficiency and effectiveness, and sales operations folds up underneath enablement to drive that productivity. Right now, it's in partnership with, so you have a lot of this enablement stuff is very focused on the effectiveness piece, right? How effective can we make salespeople? And then operations is more on the efficiency side. And it is either woven throughout this in partnership, or it's its own function, right? But down the road, if we were orchestrating well, it would seem logical to bring both together, operations and enablement together. But the link to it is all of these landscapes require operational, efficiency. The organizational enablement, like processes for quotes, putting quotes out, proposals out, the CRM, updating the CRM, that's a lot of what we call organizational enablement, which is a hook into sales ops, basically. So we'll have to see how it pans out in the industry and across the different industries. That's how I see it right now.
Okay.
But they're way more structured than we are. Operations is maybe enablement will just work for them down the road, because they have way more rigor, structure, talk track, etc. than enablement folks. We can't even agree on what enablement is in enablement.
True. Yeah. To add to that, Helena, I fully agree with your point, and the thing which you say, Brian, I observe as well that because operations has more history, so to say, is much easier to understand by leadership. They don't often make the link between them, and they are very nervous to make sales enablement leading over operations. The other thing I noticed is that if you really would have a data-driven organization, which only very few are, then they see the added value of the combination. If, to your point, Brian, a lot of organizations have just operations as maintaining their sales force, and they're not really using data and metric to drive sales behavior, then it becomes even more difficult to make the bridge with enablement, how to optimize pipelines, how to increase sales velocity, how to do all those things, because they're not measuring that to start with. They only talk about discounts for proposals, which can be handled by the Salesforce system. You don't need sales enablement for that. So I would hope for that in future, the counter would happen, Brian, that enablement would have larger control within companies, and that operations, sales operations, commercial operations would be a part of the initiative which is driven by enablement. Just my 2 cents.
Yeah, I hope so too. It's going to start with the 10 of us on this call. I can tell you that, because in the market, I just don't see anybody having this conversation right now.
I agree. And the fact we can't agree upon a definition of enablement doesn't help absolutely to strengthen the forces there. So yeah. I agree.
Yeah. All right.
I think just the phrase commercial enablement instead of sales enablement actually makes room for sales operations as an integral part.
I agree there as well, Helen. I had several discussions where they said you claim to be independent as enablement, but because you're called sales, you're biased towards sales to start with. You're not agnostic to the other departments in the organization. And then okay, if it already falls apart with that, then, so I fully agree there. Commercial enablement would be a better phrase then, a better term to start the discussion.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, so a little sneak peek, I'm working on a introduction to commercial enablement course that I'll put in Orchestrate Sales. And I do want us to double down on commercial enablement as opposed to revenue enablement and move off of sales enablement. I think that makes sense. I think sales enablement has really been taken over by training. And I just don't see training having this patience to talk through these things. And they're very much in the doer's side of this whole equation. So that's going to be the challenge of this group. And I think if like, for example, Phil becomes a commercial enabler and we figure out how Phil did that and we codify it and we put it behind our login and we only let commercial enablement orchestrators in, I think we're on the right path. We're not here for everybody, and we're not here lowest common denominator buzzword bingo. We're here to drive commercial enablement. And yeah, we want to take over other groups down the road, but first we got to figure out how the hell to do this. So we're making progress, and eventually we'll take over marketing. Yeah. All right. So Phil, I will put this out as, so what we do, Doug, is there's these A through J's here. We're orchestrating at multiple levels. This is the journey double click. So we've been on this journey with Phil. We took the levels of maturity. There's a level 1, 2, 3. There's 5 milestones each, and each of the milestones has 7 steps. So like, for example, a couple meetings ago, we went through step 1. So Phil, based on the playbook, you want to share some of your situation and where you're at, and maybe we'll double click into one. And just the disclaimer is we're not here to solution on Phil and should on him. So you should do this, you should do that, you should do this. We're not here to speak for Phil like, well, I think Phil needs to have this answer. We're here to put on your doctor lab coat, and what do we observe? What questions can we ask? How do we think this through? Right? This is a figure it out, not a get it done discussion.
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, I got pulled into the principal's office for a minute. So fun stuff.
Oh,
But
sorry.
yeah, no, that's okay.
Just say you're orchestrating. Sorry about
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was relevant. It was relevant to orchestration. So, whatever. Where were we at last time, Brian? You remember? I feel like we were.
Yeah, you were on the baseline contributions. So
Okay,
we talked a lot about your team and your existing team and how do you elevate the contribution of the team. And so
Yeah.
we double clicked into 4, then we went through 1, 2 after that.
Okay.
So we can do a forced march view. We can start at 1 and go through slide by slide and just see what jumps out at you. Happy to do that. And that
Yeah,
might be good for Doug.
I'm open to wherever we want to go, whatever we want to go. I know we did get through those things and kind of talk through them, and what we did was kind of talk through each of the sub steps under each one of these.
Yep.
And it was kind of a green, yellow, red approach.
Yep.
As far as health, what's the pulse, what's the health check. I think baseline contributions actually is a pretty important one to me right now.
Okay.
Just because, my 3 weeks ago, my team changed as far as I added another layer of, enablement folks that are not actually, enablement folks from they're more like product SMEs and sales engineers to a degree. So it just complicated the org design. And now that's kind of more of the discussions I'm having right now with what does it look like globally. I've got a leader that's kind of driving the headcount for me, and I'm needing to kind of disagree and position all of the org design moving forward if we move into a global capacity, right? So
Yeah.
So this one's kind of difficult for me right now because I got to focus on now and say, okay, I have the next 45 days to get the house in order with what I have, knowing that it's going to change dynamically after that 45 days, right? So
Yeah. And then this one, you can see here, if we're going through, one idea is if you baseline, then what are your win sprints? So where are you going to get your quick wins? What's your win portfolio? And then that brings you into, okay, now how do we ratchet people across the team? So, one thing that we talked about last time was the baseline. Then, following this approach, which again is open for debate, but it seemed logical to say, okay, how do you use what you have, leverage what you have, and where can you get some wins? And then based on that, how do you carve out the stretch to number 6, which is the next, now you're in level 2 enablement, which is we're elevating the roles and skills of your team to anchor what you've ratcheted. You've stretched and ratcheted based on these win sprints. So do you have any thoughts on a portfolio of initiatives that will help these folks start stretching, that you can elevate their skills and roles with? That's one way to think about it.
yeah.
And like by that I mean, if I put this up, so the next one, so we did 4 last time. So if I go through this, the baseline baseline contributions is here, sorry. Okay, so we did this one last time, baseline contributions. We talked a lot about this, team structure, you went over your org. The next one on the playbook, which would be, okay, well, how are you going to engage? How are you thinking about elevating your measures, elevating your impact? What friction are you seeing? What can people team around? It's interesting on the drive teaming one. I used to say, look, if we can't even run a meeting, how are we going to change sales and the ecosystem of sales enablement? So if we can't orchestrate a single piece of paper, how are we going to orchestrate across the organization?
Right.
So that's teaming around what? Can they build stuff together? What is the stuff they can build, low-hanging fruit, and then what are the incremental wins? That's the win sprints is, hey, let me show you some baby steps here that you can get ready, because when we are global enablement, we're not going to sit around and wonder how we just got this huge remit. Now, what are we going to do? So it's kind of like, in a baseball analogy, it's like, how do you develop the farm team with win sprints?
Right. So if we look at this right here, we can kind of follow the same format. So when we're talking about defining engagement model, I feel like that's a solid yellow-green. We've got a prototype in place. So that way others know how to kind of request and activate our services, and we have a rhythm of the business, if you will, to kind of complement that. So the reason I would say it's yellow is because it's new, right? I mean, it's a prototype. We're going to learn things over the next month or two before we can start to really optimize it. As we have, over 20 different activating groups, which could be requesting sales enablement services of some sort, right? So I feel really good about it. Like I said, it's a yellow, but it's a solid yellow-green because of where it's at. It's working very well right now, and in 5 weeks we've got over 80 requests. So if that's not productitis, I don't know what is. Just so you kind of get an idea of what's out there and what's coming at us, right? So impact measures. So are we talking about like defining metrics here to the business in what we're going to do, Brian?
Yeah, this one is like, how do you know if your farm team's working? So like, how do you make the change small enough to say, hey, that's a win right there. You've impacted you've had positive impact. High five. That's what I mean there is make it small enough.
Yeah, that's good. That makes sense then. So then what I would say is that again, that's very new. Before there was no measure of success. There was no, we weren't taking attendance. We didn't have any kind of NPS on the training experience. We weren't tracking business metrics as far as the outcomes, 30, 60, 90 from the business down the road, right? So we're in the process of doing this. So I would say that, short term, it's all about being able to capture what we should know, like how many people came and what they thought about it. And that's kind of the short term piece. As we get, part of, I think I missed out on the story is the other pillars of sales operations are structuring up as well. So I don't actually have an activated reporting group, an insight group that I can lean on, and nor do I want to become one myself, right? So I'm comfortable with that level of reporting. I can do a heck of a lot more. I just don't want to. So I'm going to lean on that group to be able to benchmark out performance on the specific products and attachment as far as pipeline and results at the 30, 60, 90. We're just not there yet because I'm waiting on, a partnership to mature before I can actually activate that group, if that makes sense. So does that make sense, everyone?
Where are we? Forgive me. In terms of these, what's
impact measures? Number 2, impact measures.
Impact measures. Okay.
Yeah, impact measures. So
yeah, I added a little bit more detail, but it's this idea of how do you make the changes small enough? I think in enablement, hey, how do you measure that? So, I was thinking about, I'm going to be in global enablement and I'm going to need to roll out my team. Okay, how are you going to measure that? And it's just that the whole measurement discussion is a bit of it's funny to me. I get we got to measure stuff, but in this case where we're driving something that's going to be so, you know, orchestrated. It's really, how do you make it small enough to say we're making progress? Because if you can't, the win sprints number 5 is, if you can't say, Mark, we were talking about this earlier on a call, if you can't document what a win is along the way,
Right.
then the internal bias is the win is only achieved when you're done. The win is only achieved when you fully launch to every single person in sales. And if you don't control that winning is these incremental sprints along the way, or these baby steps, and that's a win. If you can't get that going and at least have the conversation, you'll never be able to meet expectations, because the bias internally is you've trained every single person, they're all proficient, they're all selling above quota, you're never done with any of that, and you suck. That's like the message that comes across, and it's not true. So I think sales enablement orchestrators, you know, commercial enablement orchestrators have to do a better job at declaring victory along the way. And Scott and I talk about this a lot. It's like, what is progress? And that's what number 2 is about.
So is that getting away from some of the business metrics to maybe creating a different set of win metrics? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it could be.
You know,
I mean, he mentioned some like
right.
attendance, and there's also some metrics that he mentioned too, like a number of business units or teams, number of sales teams supporting. I mean, most sales enablement don't understand the number of sales forces they're supporting. They just call them sellers, you know? So
Yeah,
that's a
and very
metric of I'm supporting 24 different groups or whatever internally. And then it's like, okay, well, how many initiatives are you supporting underneath that? Those are operational, you know, impact measures. They're not the, is everybody over quota, but
Is
you
that
know,
helping, Phil? I mean,
yeah. I mean, that's a good conversation. One thing I'll add too, as well, Brian, and I'd like to get, you know, kind of insight on that is, you know, I identified some impact measures really as small milestones as well, right? So I said, okay, guys, it's the beginning of April. The measure of success for April is that we can publish a May training calendar so people know when training is going to happen, who it's targeted for, right? There's a controlled level of training, meaning it's not, you know, 3 times on Tuesday and 1 time on Thursday and, you know, random stuff on Friday, right? We have a rhythm of when learning happens. So if we can get the training calendar out and published, and if we can get this operating or engagement model, you know, operational, and if I can roadshow the engagement model with these top 3 requesting groups, those are all impact measures of success. And that's kind of, you know, one of the things that I kind of put a stake in the ground at the beginning of the month before we got to this month, May, and said, if we can do these things, we actually have a lot of progress under our belt. And it doesn't feel like it, and it doesn't look like it, because we're used to numbers and 127% to quota or whatever the case may be. But those are milestone measures that I'll be really happy with if I can get all these new people to move in a direction they've never moved before. So, you know, that was something
makes sense. Helena, what do you think about that? I'd love to hear your perspective.
You're muted.
Helena, you're muted.
Yeah, you're muted. Sorry.
Sorry, thank you. So one measure that we often used in rolling out different types of initiatives or programs, it could be training, it could be well, usage of new releases in the CRM system. So a lot of different types of areas, but we measured something that we called full deployment. But full deployment for us was never 100%. It was actually 80%, good enough. And it was only in a few exceptions that we needed to look at, well, it's actually not 80%, it needs to be more towards 100%. But in general, 80% full deployment was a very good measure, because that also allowed us to move on to the next project.
So 80% of what? 80% people trained, 80% what 80% of
Yes,
what?
so for instance, rolling out the sales training on the new sales methodology. Well, 80% of the various types of sales roles in the various business units. So per business units, the goal was to achieve that at least 80% of the sales guys, so both the ones who were more in a hunter type of role and the ones who were in a farmer type of role, or whatever you call them, we measured for each of the business units and the various types of sales roles, but the goal was 80%. And then we were satisfied. But it was the same measure when, for instance, we looked at, well, had we put a new asset on the sales knowledge management platform? Well, what was the usage of a new asset for when it came to the relevant, well, our internal customers? Well, if it was an asset that needed to be used basically by everyone, and if 80% actually were using it, then that was good enough. So it really covered, if we released something, a major change in the CRM system, again, was it 80% of the CRM users? Had they been trained on that so that they knew what to do and why? Well, then that was good enough.
So I'm still trying to kind of wrangle in this in Phil's terms. What are we measuring? I mean, that's a pretty big. Is that too broad of a training? Or are we looking to go maybe into more minutia? So here's a result. As a result of this, we're seeing some wins along. Usage of this new asset. We've got a percentage of salespeople that are using this and are saying it's beneficial. It is being used in more that type of measurement. Are we going, or is that too deep?
Well,
if you're trying to help Phil in terms of how he's relating to this.
Well, I mean, I think we define it ourselves, to be honest with you, and because from my perspective, there aren't benchmarks, so I don't know if I'm elevating anything right now, right? So I've leaned in heavily into the milestones, and then I've said that, you know, we're going to establish benchmarks, and that's actually determining an impact, because once we establish a benchmark, then the next week we can say, okay, how did we do against what we did last week? And then the week after and the week after, we say, okay, cool, we have a benchmark for a month. Now let's see how we can elevate that next month with the new training calendar. And we're going to tweak the plan because whatever the case may be, right? This went well. This could have gone better if we would have done it this way, right? And this is how we want to, you know, completely shift. So to me, for right now, where we're at, it's not really about metrics as much as it's about milestones, but those are still measures, right?
Yep.
And that's just kind of, you know, I think where my head's at on that. I would love to be about metrics right now. We're just not there. We're just not there yet, because we're building it as we go.
Yeah, Eric, what do you think about this conversation too? What have you seen? Because I know you do a lot of work in companies that are starting new things and measuring the impact when cross-functional work.
Without metrics, it makes objective conversations really, really difficult. So that's pretty foundational in my experience. Unless we just want to sit around and discuss, that's okay too. But at some point, feelings don't matter anymore, and we got to get down to objective criteria.
Yeah, and what Phil's talking about is it's the frame. So you take on one hand a sales, in sales enablement, metrics equals percent quota attainment, and everything we do impacts quota, and you end up with this proliferation of, every single campaign is going to yield a percentage increase in sales results, which is, the BS in and of
Not
itself.
realistic.
Right. And so what Phil's done is he's framed out what progress is, and there is a measure. It's are we on time? They're a little bit more quality measures, and are we establishing a cadence, which is a relationship rhythm, measure. These are other measures of the operating model that aren't necessarily based on rep performance. They're based on, does Phil have his shit together, basically. Right. So is that a measure?
Exactly. And when I was on the other side of the pond, I was establishing all this. So I had benchmarks, and we were able to kind of start to see, are we impacting, first call resolution, right, in the support space, and are we driving pipeline for this particular product? But it didn't exist in new business sales. It only existed because I created it in the other side of the pond. So we've got a long ways to go. Like I said, we're a very young organization, and enablement is an afterthought because everybody learned by sitting with everybody for a long period of time, right? Osmosis was the strategy, which obviously is asinine, right? But that's okay. It worked for a while. Now we're just too big and it's not working anymore.
It reminds me when groups come together, kind of like, the forming, storming, norming kind of.
Exactly.
You're in the forming stage, so we really don't have, and in that in that segment of work, exactly these types of things, measures are going to be different than when we're further along.
Right.
Right.
Well, what would you say to that, Eric? Right. So
yeah, but Eric probably would say, well, that's great, but still we need to, I guess.
Well, I don't know. Let's let Eric answer. Don't answer for him. But I want to hear what he has to say, because he's saying they're irrelevant and without objective measures. So I'm just wondering if that's an objective measure that's gonna move the needle.
So there isn't a perfect metric, right? And I think that this is why the acronym KPI, right? It captures this, that they're indicators. And they're key, but that doesn't mean they're all inclusive and they're proof. And there's also hierarchy in these metrics, right? In terms of the utility that they provide and what they attach to, right? So, close ratio, it's part of a mosaic or a dashboard that tells an overall story. And, we get people that just grab onto one measure and then that's their proof that something's working or not. And, that's seems to be short-sighted. But when you elevate all this stuff to, what are we trying to achieve as an organization, and have stuff that cascades from that, we're fighting human nature, but keeping that sort of ideal in mind helps move things in the right direction, in my experience. There's a cultural component of this, right? And if the rest of the organization doesn't accept that, we're rowing this canoe upstream in a hard way.
It is a good point. Like it's an interesting, I can't remember the exact discussion I had, but what pops into mind, I know I had this discussion is, well, it doesn't matter what you measure, it's what your executive team will choose to believe about what you're measuring. Something like that. Like if Phil can get them to agree that these are good measures, then they're good measures for right now. They need to be solid, and they need to be driving objectivity, but you got to be able to stand behind them. Something like that.
They also go in and out of vogue depending on what's happening in the org, right? Like once a particular KPI sort of becomes under control, folks lose interest in it naturally.
Yeah, I agree. We have a KPI called CPO, which stands for customers pissed off. Right?
Awesome.
It's a real KPI. But if you ask anyone how it's calculated, they could not tell you because it's so complex, right? And so I like what you're saying about, you know, KPIs are kind of, to me, they're kind of trendy depending on who the leader is in the chair at that point in time. And that made sense as they were starting up, right? Because they could say, oh, we got people pissed off. That's not good. We're not going to get any more customers. But now we've gotten to the point where we can't articulate why they're pissed off. So how do you fix that, right? How do you fix that? So we don't have anything weird like that on the sales side yet. Every KPI is important in new business sales. It's the dashboard that doesn't end, right? When you scroll and scroll and scroll. So again, there's not a key sales planning group that's able to define these are our top 3 metrics or top 3 KPIs. These are our official leading indicators of performance and our trailing indicators of performance. So it's not there, or if it is there, I would probably firmly disagree with it. What's in place, you know? So it's a bit of a challenging area because I get what you're saying, Eric, on the measures and the numbers, right? It's the numbers don't lie, and we've got to be able to define what progress should be, and illustrate, you know, our path on the way to progress, right? But they also didn't consider things like product budget as part of prioritization, and now we are. Okay, you want to train somebody, tell me how much money this is supposed to bring in, because, right? Okay, priority. Let's make sure that we do that because it's a big budget number. There's a lot of market opportunity. It's a niche, whatever the case may be, right? It wasn't a lot of why, it was just, okay, sure, that sounds great. You want to train somebody? Sure. So, you know, this conversation is going to be very different in month 3, especially different in month 6, just because we're building the foundation in a lot of ways and having to compensate what should be a business metric with a milestone instead because of the maturity of the organization in this snapshot. So
Yeah, I like
that's
that.
my perspective. It frustrates me being in the middle of it too. So I know it's weird, probably like,
Well, that's why we need it. You need a PPO metric.
Yeah.
Phil pissed off.
Yeah. Well, that's easy to calculate.
Urge to kill rising.
Yeah. You just look at my eyebrows. That's what I think. What? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so this is a good conversation, and I think that's why I was wording this less around, you know, these are impact measures, however you define impact, and whatever you want to measure. You know, I will say that because this is morphing into, and is the segue to kind of level 2 enablement in this playbook, that it is probably a good idea to look at for the sales teams you're supporting, what is their pipeline? You know, there are some pipeline metrics, like, are they getting the right meetings? Are they moving through from a velocity perspective, that you can have as overarching, because those can peg to your future services, you know, and keeping those front and center as, look, we have a service for helping reps get proposals out the door. And we look at this milestone, this sales stage, and we can tell how long our proposals take. Here's our fix for that. Now we're driving that outcome, right? Things like that down the road is where you want to maybe think about heading to get into that level 2 enablement section.
Yep, exactly.
But I like the operational metrics, you know, the house and order metrics, let's get everybody focused to develop these sprints to build stuff together. Can we publish a consistent calendar? You know, there's a lot of orchestration required to do that. That's a great win to be able to do that, in my perspective.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we got, 80 requests in 5 weeks, right? And we have literally, 6 slots to work with. Right. So, a lot of that stuff is stupid stuff that we just don't do, and that goes to remediating friction. To be honest with you, a lot of it is just saying no, that's a waste of time. We're not going to do that. We're not going to do that. We're not going to do that. And there's a lot of uncomfortableness, I think, on the team with things that they're used to doing that we are now saying no to. everybody doesn't get access. We're the bouncers, if you will. And there's criteria in prioritization. So where everything used to be at least a 45-minute training, so to speak, right? Now, a lot of things are being solutioned with just knowledge articles and communications and alternative means of communication. We set up a Slack channel that's literally like a news channel where it's just, here's what's happening and here's a demo to see what it is. Click here for more resources, right? So we're trying to build new muscles and new rhythms to solve problems in different ways because there's so many of them, and many of them are low level of effort, low level of impact type of requests that we don't, candidly, I don't even want to do those things, but we need to get the tasks out the door. So we tried to find out, what's a different way to handle those without not doing anything, right? So it's been kind of interesting prototyping some of those channels of communication to get to the audience that we have.
Yeah, I had
Yeah.
a question on that. So when you were initially describing it and the 80 requests, right, that you're saying now that you have to say no to. So obviously that's not an ideal situation, right? And I'm just wondering and I know you're new in the role, so you're building out these services, but is the vision or goal that there's defined services that people can request rather than this, what seems to be enabling sort of random acts of random requests, random acts, which is where you don't want to be, right? But it almost seems like you've kind of created a bit of a monster in a way, because you're having to say no to the business, which is and the perception that brings and everything else.
Yeah, well, but now I can articulate things like capacity for my people and requests and requesting groups. And before they didn't have that visibility. And they're like, why is it so crazy? They couldn't articulate it at all. So, yes, it's a time and place thing. And yes, it gets worse before it gets better, right? And training is a silver bullet right now within the organization. And that's not the truth. We know that not to be the truth. So it's about, I can't determine I can't help people understand what our services are versus aren't if they don't have a way to get to the door before I bounce them in a different direction. Because right now they would go there and people would just do random acts of enablement to be good partners everywhere. And that's great, but you can't scale that. And if so-and-so calls in, all business and all work stops for the day because they're a single point of failure. And that's kind of where we were and what was happening. And by having all of this visibility, now I can help not just coach my team in defining what our services are, but coach the requesters and the requesting groups to define, oh no, that's a process that goes to this group. It doesn't start with us. It goes to a different group. And if we need to be engaged, they will activate us at that point in time. Otherwise, no big deal, right? We don't need to worry about it. So it's helping the other components of the business kind of mature at the same time as my own team as we structure up our group as kind of an epicenter to a lot of activity that's happening.
Yeah, I get it. Thanks for explaining.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I have to explain it to myself regularly. Regularly.
So Phil, do you see anything else on this milestone?
I think teaming is a huge one, real, drive teaming. I had a couple people that were like the single points of failure and saviors at the same time, right? And I'm really trying to lead by example and help them kind of connect cross-functional resources and set expectations of how they team and what good teaming looks like, meaning, Brian, this is what I expect from you. This is what you can expect from me in this equation. So that way we can, the power of 2 versus 1 in that equation, right? So that there's inner team dynamics and then there's cross-functional dynamics in our environment as well. And, it's amazing to me how many people believe that they just have to carry the flag by themselves all the time and kill themselves from Zoom meeting to Zoom meeting and getting very, very little done. So that's been a big win with a relatively small level of effort, I would say, in starting to activate that muscle within my team.
Is that like a conversation, or is it because you're, in the leadership role, you can just kind of mandate it, or what does that look like?
I think it's been different with different people on my team. I've got some really young and career folks, and then I've got some I've been around for a while folks, right? So I've been around for a while folks, it's about like, hey, let's work together on this, or I would like you, Brian, to work with Eric on this project because this, but Eric's really good at that, right? We did go through a strength assessment when we kind of got together first, and I said, hey, let's talk about that as a group. And we did kind of a come to me win exercise. So come to me win, it's X, Y, and Z, because I love to do that. That's my passion. I'm good at that. Leave me out when it's ABC, because those are not the things. And that helps, because then they kind of start to see their strengths and opportunities amongst each other and say, okay, cool. I know to go to Phil for this, and I know to go to, Helena for that, or whatever the case may be, right? So, there's a lot of that internally, and then it was promoting that as in, hey, Brian, come with me to this meeting because I think I might want you to lead this project, and observation and reflection. Here's how I drove that conversation with stakeholder. Here's what I asked of stakeholder. Here's what we committed to stakeholder. This is kind of a good expectation of how we can promote cross-functional teaming. I'd like you to drive from here and keep me as an informed, but you be the responsible party, right? So it's a lot of coaching in the trenches, I would say, which is a big part of month one. I've been busy and tired.
Makes sense, yeah. Anybody have any other questions for Phil? We have about 5 minutes left.
Yeah, and if there's a better way, if you've had better success in trying to kind of mature a team and define an operating model and work with maturing groups around you, by all means, like, let me know what's worked for you.
Phil, a question. And please bear in mind, I unfortunately wasn't here for the last two sessions, so you might already have discussed this. But with, I guess, a fairly new team as yours, how have you ensured that the various team members, that they are aware of, if you like, the sales enablement supply chain flow and the sort of the integration hook point between the various team members or the parts of the team? Do you understand my question?
No, you cut out for a section of it there for me, so I'm sorry. So we're talking about like inner team dynamics?
Yeah. So I envision, because I have no clue what your team looks like, but I envision that you have members of your team with very special roles. So you might have someone who is creating training content, someone who is looking at creating template for content assets, someone who might be working with things that are related to the CRM system, the design of that. And someone who's looking at the processes, the sales and field marketing processes, for instance. And in many sales enablement initiatives, it's not just one person of the sales enablement team who is involved. But it usually starts with one section of the sales enablement team or one team member. Right. But then it's like a supply chain flow within the team of, well, it starts here and then it goes to the next, and sometimes there are iterations between them. I was wondering, well, how are you, if that's the case in your situation, what type of hook points have you, what type of integration points have you created within your team to ensure a smooth supply chain, sales enablement supply chain?
Yeah, so that's a good question, and it's a very unorthodox org that I kind of inherited. I have no builders. I have nobody that actually builds anything as their primary role. They're more like, I've got some functional SMEs and then some product SMEs, and then we kind of make it work. Oddly enough, right? We kind of make it work. So what I do have, like a key strength, is tenure. There's a lot of tenure. These are all folks that have been salespeople in various capacities and have traveled through, so they understand the ecosystem. So I have to retrain the muscle, but the tenure strength comes in when it comes to things. We're in the midst of a conversation. I talk to them all the time about the spidey sense, right? Like if your spidey sense is going off and there's about to be trouble, what are we listening for, right? What are we anticipating? We're anticipating use case breakage with quoting, quoting process. We're anticipating, activation break with regard to the process flow. And unfortunately, they have to engage actually cross-functional groups within our own org, within the sales ops org, as opposed to inter-team, cross-functional groups, not within their own team, but within, within a peer set, a wider peer set. And they have to kind of like listen for that and pull that in. We have been in the process of kind of defining responsibilities for our dependencies, right? Here are all the dependencies, here's the responsible party, so that way they know if there's gaps, they can tap somebody on the shoulder and activate them at that point, most of which is outside the actual team, but they are really good about pulling each other in. Hey, Brian, this crosses into blank, that's your new hire, you're the new hire guy, right? You need to be, do you want to attach to this or do you want me to inform you on this? So there's not a good defined way to do that. They just kind of do that naturally based on experience, which is, another problem that we need to, playbook and figure out, right? But it's a good question. We don't have that solved yet. It's roadmapped. It's like everything else, it's roadmapped.
It will grow on you.
Exactly.
Well, feel free to reach out to anybody in between these. And thanks again, Phil, for coming to these. Hopefully this was valuable for you. And I learned a lot, so I appreciate the discussion. And
yeah, it's fun. It's like therapy for me at the same time. So I appreciate everyone's insight and support,
Yeah, and then we'll pick up next week on 6 and just keep chugging. Sound like a plan?
Sounds good. Have a great rest of the week, everyone. Have a great weekend.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Yeah, you too.
Thanks, everybody.
Everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.